How does a typhoon occur? The atmosphere of the Earth is going around in 4 to 5 days faster than the Earth's rotation due to Earth's rotation and solar wind. However, the flow of the atmosphere orbiting the Earth in the east-west direction was not properly understood. The elucidation had been prevented by the preconception of Coriolis force, which does not have the actual power to react. In the Madden-Julian oscillation, a collection of several thousand km of cumulonimbus clouds extending east-west is moving east at 5 meters sec along the equator. At the bottom of the cumulonimbus cloud, there is an air flow toward the center with low atmospheric pressure. Its winds are east to west, winds are weak, and west to east winds are strong. The reason is that water vapor evaporating from the sea level has the velocity component of the Earth's rotation. The Earth's rotational speed is 463 meters sec near the equator, and it accelerates the air flow from west to center on the west side and slows down the air flow from east to center on the east side. On the other hand, the distance around the Earth is shorter in areas with higher latitudes than near the equator. Therefore, the rotational speed is slower in areas with high latitudes where the distance to go around the Earth is short. Therefore, equatorial counter-currents moving from west to east near the equator are fast, and equatorial currents moving from east to west at both sides of this equatorial counter-current are slow. The name of equatorial counter-current depends on the following misunderstanding of the mechanism that the equatorial counter-current has occurred near the equator. Even though Coriolis force does not act unless it is moved in the north-south direction, it had been explained that the movements of sea water are occurred by the trade wind due to Coriolis force, and the sea level of west became higher than east. The trade wind is the flow of atmosphere above the equator in the opposite direction to the Earth's rotation. The solar wind that possesses Sun's counterclockwise rotational speed of 1.89 km/sec drives the atmosphere above the equator through the gear mechanism. The mechanism moves the atmosphere of the daytime hemisphere from east to west in the clockwise direction. The force driving this trade wind is large near the equator, but smaller in areas with higher latitudes. In the mid-latitudes, there is an atmospheric flow that orbits faster than the west to east rotation of the Earth, called a westerly wind. The westerly wind is driven by the solar wind that is emitted at escape rate 617.5 km/sec from the Sun. A part of kinetic energy of the solar wind is transferred to the atmosphere through the collisions. The solar wind particles are in the same direction as they pass through the east side of the Earth, and the solar wind accelerates the atmosphere, which rotates counterclockwise from west to east. But at the western side, the solar wind slows down the flow of the atmosphere. Since accelerating effect surpasses the slowing effect, the atmosphere is moved counterclockwise direction from west to east. The atmosphere of upper troposphere rotates in the boundary area where the trade winds over the equator come into contact with the westerly winds above the subtropical side. Its direction of rotation is opposite in the northern and southern hemispheres. In the sky over cumulonimbus clouds occurring in the subtropical waters of the northern hemisphere, the atmosphere rotates in the clockwise direction, and the updraft at the bottom of the cumulonimbus clouds rotates counterclockwise along the sea current. When a cumulonimbus cloud occurs, water vapor in the upper portion of the cloud becomes to rain, and a descending air flow of clock rotation is generated. That is, a cumulonimbus cloud occurring in subtropical area causes updraft and downdraft that turn in the opposite direction, and vortexes are generated at the boundary of two air flows. The three air flows are cooperated and form a typhoon. So, the typhoon blowing on the ground is in the counterclockwise direction, but the course of the typhoon becomes the clock rotation direction by the air flow of the atmosphere in the upper sky. In this way, if we interpret the facts obediently without having any preconceptions, we can understand how typhoon occurs.
Thank you for your attention.